Every man knows there are two kinds of enemies at work. The first kind actually hates you. The second kind is you in a different tie. That second kind is the more dangerous one, because eventually one of you is going to figure out you've been fighting a mirror. Alexis Reyes was the second kind. For 13 months I told everyone at Landerson Vance that I hated her. For 13 months I sent emails without copying her. For 13 months I scheduled meetings that overlapped with hers. For 13 months I was, on paper, the meanest colleague she'd ever had. And then, on a Thursday night in February, a blizzard shut down the streets of Charlotte, and the two of us got trapped in an empty office building on the 14th floor, with no way out until morning. She turned off the overhead lights. She sat down on the couch in the corner of the conference room. She looked at me across a distance that suddenly felt like nothing, and she said, very softly, "Come sit closer, Ryan. I'm tired of pretending. My name is Ryan Bello. I'm 34 years old, and I run the East Coast marketing division of a mid-sized fintech company called Landerson Vance. Nobody outside the industry has heard of it. If you take credit card payments at a small business, there's a 1 in 4 chance we handle your merchant services. That's what I do all day. I got here the hard way. My father drove a delivery truck for a bread company in the Bronx for 31 years. My mother cleaned offices at night in Midtown. I was the first person in my family to finish college. I've been at Landerson Vance 11 years, 6 promotions, 140 people underneath me, and I still, every morning, put on the same kind of gray check tie my father wore to parent-teacher night, because I've never quite gotten over the feeling that I'm not supposed to be here. The other person who felt that way at Landerson Vance was Alexis Reyes. Alexis was hired 13 months before the night I'm telling you about. She came in as a VP of strategy, 1 level above me on paper, pulled sideways into my orbit because our 2 departments were fighting for the same C-suite attention. She was 32, Cuban-American, from Miami, raised by a single mother who ran a hair salon out of the family kitchen. She had gone to Wharton on scholarship and then to McKinsey for 4 years before Landerson Vance recruited her. She was, on paper, better than me. Better school. Better resume. Better track record. I decided within 6 days of her arrival that I was going to end her. Not literally. Nobody sabotages anybody in real corporate life the way they do it in movies. But I made a series of small deliberate choices. I stopped copying her on cross-functional emails. I scheduled meetings that overlapped with hers. I made sure my numbers were in the CFO's inbox before hers were. I built a small campaign of quiet, plausibly deniable friction that was designed to make her look slower than she was. And she noticed within a week, and started fighting back. Also quietly. Also deniably. Every meeting we were in together for a year, we were essentially 2 lawyers negotiating a divorce nobody had filed. The rest of the office noticed. There were jokes. There was a running bet in the analyst pool about which one of us would get fired first. Everyone assumed we hated each other. I assumed I hated her too. I was wrong about that. I just didn't know I was wrong yet. The Thursday night of the blizzard, we were both in the office late because the VP position we were both up for, the SVP of North American Strategy, was being decided the following Monday. 2 memos, 1 job. Nobody was going home until they were done. I was in my office on the 14th floor. She was in her office 3 doors down. Around 8 p.m. the snow started. Around 10 p.m. the city issued a travel advisory. Around 11 p.m. the building's night manager came up on the elevator and told us both, personally, that the streets around the building had just been closed. Nobody was driving anywhere for probably 12 hours. He said the 24th floor had a couch. He said the vending machines on 8 worked. He said good luck. He rode the elevator back down. And it was me and Alexis Reyes, alone in a building that could hold 1,800 people, for the next 12 hours. I found her in the break room, around 11:30. She was making tea. She was wearing what she'd worn to work, a black turtleneck, gray trousers, boots she'd unzipped and pushed off her feet, so she was standing in the kitchen in socks. Her hair was down. I don't think I'd ever seen it down. She usually wore it clipped up. She had it hanging past her shoulders now. She looked up. Bello. Reyes. You want tea? I want coffee. Suit yourself. She turned back to her mug. I made coffee at the machine. We didn't speak. The break room was quiet enough that I could hear the water hitting the inside of her cup. "So we're doing this," I said finally. "Doing what?" "Being stuck here together." She turned around, leaned back against the counter with her tea in both hands. Looked at me the way she looked at me in meetings, like she was cataloging me, filing me, deciding which drawer to put me in. "Ryan, we could pretend we're not stuck together. You could go work in your office, and I could go work in mine, and we could pass each other in the hallway at 3 a.m., like ghosts. That's one option. What's the other option? The other option is we sit down like adults and admit we're both starving. It's midnight, there's a blizzard, and neither of us is going to finish that memo tonight anyway." I looked at her. "You brought food?" "I ordered dinner in at 7. There's half a container of pad thai in the fridge, and I don't want to eat it alone. I hadn't eaten since noon, my stomach hurt, and I was, if I was being honest with myself, tired. Tired of the memo, tired of the campaign, tired of the 12-month Cold War I'd been maintaining with the woman standing in front of me. "Conference room B," I said, "the one on the corner. Better view. Meet you there in 5 minutes." We ate half a container of pad thai off paper plates at midnight in a conference room, sitting across the table from each other. Neither of us said anything about work. Instead, she asked me where I was from. I told her. She told me about Miami. She told me about her mother's salon. She told me the story of the first time she ever wore a business suit. She was 17 years old, working an internship at a bank in Coral Gables, and her mother had cried in the parking lot after dropping her off because she'd said, "Alexis, I've never seen anybody in our family wear this." I told her about my father's ties. I told her the whole story, about how he had one gray check tie he wore for school events, how he was so proud of it and it was so cheap and so obviously off the rack, how the other fathers at those meetings never quite looked him in the eye. I told her that when I made my first $100,000 a year, I went to a store in the Diamond District and I bought 30 gray check ties and I had them shipped to my father's apartment with no note, because I didn't know how to say the thing I was trying to say out loud. She stopped chewing. She looked at me across the table for a long moment. Her hand moved slightly on the table, like she was about to reach across for mine. She caught herself, set the fork down instead. "Did he ever say anything about the ties?" "He wore them, every day, until the day he died." She looked at me, didn't move, didn't blink. "Ryan." "Yeah? Why have we been enemies for a year?" I didn't answer right away. Picked up my paper cup, set it down, picked it up again. "Because you walked in on day 1, and you were smarter than me, and more polished than me, and I decided that meant I had to hurt you before you had time to hurt me." She nodded slowly. "And I walked in on day 1, and I saw you in your gray check tie and thought, oh, there he is. There's the guy who's going to make me feel like I don't belong here. So I decided the same thing." We looked at each other. "Alexis, I'm sorry." "Me too. I've hated you for a year, based on a story I made up in my head about you the first week." "I know. I did the same thing. That's a terrible way to spend a year. It's a really terrible way to spend a year." The wind pushed against the windows. Somewhere in the building, an ice maker cycled. "You know what the worst part is?" she said. "What?" 6 months ago I stopped hating you, and I didn't tell anyone. Because I couldn't figure out how to reverse a year of Cold War without looking like a woman who'd been faking it, and I couldn't afford to look weak, so I just kept doing it, kept fighting you, because I had built a persona at this company that required me to fight you. Alexis. "I know. 6 months ago?" 6 months ago. What happened 6 months ago?" She was quiet for a long moment, reached up and pulled a clip out of her hair, shook it loose, ran a hand through it. I don't think she was trying to do anything. I think she was just tired. 6 months ago," she said, "you presented at the all hands. There was that Q&A, and that analyst, the guy from the risk team, he asked you a question that was designed to trip you up. And you paused, and you looked at him, and you said, 'That's a good question. I don't know the answer. Give me until tomorrow and I'll find out.' I remember that. In 11 years of corporate life, I had never seen a man in a room full of executives say, 'I don't know the answer.' Not once, not one time. Every man I've worked with would rather lie than admit ignorance. You just told the whole room you didn't know, and then you sat down. She looked at me across the table. That's the day I stopped hating you, she said. That's the day I started paying attention to you for real. And I've been paying attention every day since, and every day it's gotten worse, and I've been keeping it locked up in a filing cabinet in my head with 3 padlocks on it because we cannot afford to be a thing, Ryan. Not when we're both up for the same job, not when there are 20 people in this building watching us. Alexis, so don't say anything back to me right now. I don't want you to say anything back to me right now. I just needed you to know. Because if we're going to sit in this building together for the next 12 hours, I can't keep pretending. I don't have the energy anymore. She stood up, picked up the empty paper plates, walked to the trash can, dropped them in, stood at the trash can with her back to me for a long moment. Then without turning around, she said, I'm going to go work on my memo. I'll see you in the morning. She walked out of the conference room. I sat in that room alone for a very long time. I didn't go back to my office. I sat in that conference room for almost 2 hours, looked out the window at a city buried under 18 inches of snow, thought about my life, about my father driving a bread truck for 31 years, about my mother emptying trash cans in Midtown at 2 a.m. so I could go to college, about every hour of every weekend I had put into my career at Landerson Vance, about the promotion memo sitting on my laptop 3 doors down, and about the woman who had just told me, over a paper plate of cold pad thai, that 6 months ago she had watched me admit I didn't know something and had started paying attention. In 11 years at that company, nobody had ever told me they had started paying attention. Around 2 a.m., I got up, walked down the hallway to my office, opened my laptop, looked at my memo, 32 pages of strategic recommendations I had spent 3 weeks perfecting. I closed the laptop, walked down the hallway to her office. Her door was open. She was at her desk, her back to the door, staring at her screen. She had put her hair back up. Her turtleneck was rolled up at the sleeves. She had a mug of tea in front of her that had gone cold hours ago. I stood in her doorway. Alexis, she turned around slowly. Ryan. I stayed in the doorway. I'm not going to submit the memo on Monday. She frowned. What? I'm not going to submit it. I'm going to send an email to the CEO before the deadline, and I'm going to withdraw my name from the promotion process. And I'm going to recommend you for it. She stared at me. Ryan, that's crazy. It's not crazy. Alexis, I've had a year to look at your work up close, and I have spent every one of the last 12 months trying not to see how good you are. You're better than me at this specific job. You'd be a better SVP than I would be. I'm going to tell them that. Ryan, you have earned this promotion. This is your whole career. No. My whole career is 11 years of trying to prove to a company that I belong in this building, and it turns out I've been trying to prove it to the wrong audience. My father would have been proud of me at year 3, when I made analyst. Everything after that was for me, and I'm tired of doing it for me alone. She stood up from her desk, walked around it, walked over to me at the doorway, stopped about 2 feet away. She was crying, very quietly, just tears on her cheeks, not sobs. Ryan, don't withdraw. I'm going to withdraw. Then come with me. Come with you where? Come sit closer. She reached back and turned off her office overhead lights. The desk lamp was still on, warm yellow. She walked to the small couch in the corner of her office. Every VP had one, and she sat down at one end. Come sit closer, Ryan. I'm tired of pretending. I walked over, sat down next to her. We didn't touch. We just sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, Ryan, listen to me. I don't want you to withdraw. Do you understand? Because if you hand it to me, I will spend the rest of my career wondering if I earned it. Alexis, let me finish. On Monday, we both submit our memos. We do the presentations. We compete like professionals. Whichever one of us gets it, the other one shakes their hand and buys them a drink, and we do it clean. Okay? Okay. And whichever one of us doesn't get it, that person doesn't have to quit. There will be other jobs. There will be other companies. This isn't the last chance for either one of us. Yes, but here's the part I want to say to you, Ryan. The part I've been trying to say for 6 months. Whatever happens Monday, whether one of us gets it or both of us end up somewhere else, I want to see what happens between us when there isn't a promotion sitting in the middle of it. Yeah. Yeah, Alexis. Me too. She let out a long, slow breath, like she had been holding it for 6 months. Then she leaned her head sideways against my shoulder. Just her head, nothing else. And I sat there in the dark of her office with the snow slamming against the window, and I let her. Neither of us kissed. Neither of us moved. Neither of us said anything for a long time. After a while, she fell asleep against me. I stayed where I was, very still, watched the storm outside her window come down and down and down until the whole city was buried and everything was, finally, quiet. She woke up at 6 a.m., sat up quickly, ran a hand through her hair, looked embarrassed, looked at me. Oh God, I fell asleep on you. You did. I'm sorry, Ryan, that was... Don't be sorry. She looked at the window. The storm had stopped. The city outside was blinding white, untouched, all caps quiet, the sun starting to come up over the East River in a way that hit the snow and lit the whole world on fire. It's beautiful, she said. It really is. She stood up, straightened her turtleneck, walked to her desk, picked up her phone, checked something. She frowned. Ryan, yeah, look at this. She turned her phone around. It was an email, sent to the entire company at 5:47 a.m. From the CEO. I read it. I read it again. I looked up at her. The email said, in essence, Landerson Vance had been acquired overnight by a private equity firm out of Boston. The deal had closed at 4 in the morning. Effective immediately, the current executive team was being dissolved. The SVP position for which Alexis and I had spent 3 weeks preparing memos did not exist anymore. Would not exist at the new company. Would not be filled by anyone. Every employee above the level of director would be receiving severance packages in the next 72 hours, which included both of us. I looked up from the phone. She looked back at me. We stared at each other for a long moment. And then, slowly, she started to laugh. Not a bitter laugh. A real one. The kind that starts in your chest and unspools up into your face. I started laughing too, because there was nothing else to do. Because for a year we had waged war over a job that had, apparently, evaporated overnight while we sat on her office couch and made peace. Because everything we had been fighting about was already gone before we started fighting. Ryan, she said, wiping her eyes, what do we do now? I looked at her, looked at the sunrise, looked at the empty city buried in snow. I don't know, but I've got severance coming, and you've got severance coming, and nobody's going to be in this office until Monday. So I think first we go find some breakfast. I think we figure out how to get out of this building. I think we find a diner that's open, if any diner is open, and we sit down like two people who are not fighting for anything anymore, and then we see what happens. She smiled. That sounds like a plan. We packed up our stuff, walked to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby in silence. The night security guard was asleep at the desk. We didn't wake him up. We pushed open the front doors of the building. The cold hit us both. The city was completely still. The sun was just up. There were no cars, no people, nothing. Just an ocean of white with the tops of parking meters sticking up like fence posts. She reached over, took my hand. Not romantically, not dramatically, just quietly. The way you hold somebody's hand when you're about to walk into weather you don't know how to walk into alone. We walked out into a Friday morning that was, for both of us, the beginning of something completely new. There was a diner on 3rd Street called Marge's that had been open since 1964. It was open that morning because Marge's is always open. The waitress didn't even seem surprised to see us. She poured coffee and brought pancakes and left us alone. Alexis slid into the booth across from me. Then, halfway through the coffee, she stood up and moved to my side. Sat closer than she needed to. Our shoulders touched. Neither of us said anything about it. We stayed in that booth for 3 hours. We talked about everything. About her mother's salon, about my father, about the acquisition, about the money we were both about to get, about what we would do with money nobody had planned to give us. Around 10 in the morning, she looked at me across the table and said, Ryan, I have a stupid idea. How stupid? Very stupid. Consulting practice. You and me. Small. Boutique. Fintech merchant services. Everything we know how to do. We start with our severance packages. We work out of a shared office. We split everything 50-50. I stared at her. Alexis. I know. That's not a stupid idea. No? That's a great idea. Really? Yeah. She smiled at me across the pancakes. Then let's do it. We shook on it. Over pancakes, in a diner, at 10 in the morning, on the Friday after a blizzard had trapped us in an empty office and rearranged our entire lives. We didn't kiss until 3 months later. It happened on a Wednesday, in her tiny apartment. I was making pasta. She was standing by the counter drinking a glass of wine and watching me stir. The kitchen was small, warm. It smelled like garlic and rosemary and rain outside the open window. Ryan. Yeah, come closer. I set the spoon down. Walked over. 2 steps. Stopped in front of her. She reached up and put her hand on my chest. Right over my heart, deliberately. And she looked up at me. Closer, she said. I bent down. She kissed me the way she did everything. Decisively. Slowly at first. Then not slowly at all. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against mine and she was breathing hard. Ryan. Yeah? I've been thinking about that for 3 months. I've been thinking about it for 6. We opened Bello and Reyes Strategy in June. Our old boss at Landerson Vance called us in September to hire us for a project. That was our second client. We had 11 clients by the end of the first year, 27 by the end of the second. We hired our first employee in year 3, a smart kid from Wharton who reminded us both of ourselves at 22. Alexis moved into my apartment in the winter of that first year. She had never lived with anybody before. She kept apologizing for taking up too much space. I kept telling her she wasn't taking up enough. We got a dog, a scruffy little mutt from the shelter named Philo who thought he was a wolf. Philo decided within a week that Alexis was his mother and forgot who I was. We got married in the second year. Small courthouse wedding. Her mother flew in from Miami and cried through the whole thing. My father flew in from the Bronx wearing one of the gray check ties. At the reception, in a small restaurant in Charlotte, my father took me aside and said, Ryan. She's a good one. I know, Dad. She reminds me of your mother. She reminds me of Mom, too. He put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, said, Don't work so hard you forget her. I said, I won't. I meant it. There is one more thing I need to tell you. Because 6 years after that blizzard night, 6 years after the pad thai and the couch and the CEO's midnight email, we got a letter in the mail at our office. Return address, a firm in Boston. Not a company we recognized, not a client. I opened it. Inside was a check, for a lot of money, and a handwritten note. The note was from the private equity partner who had led the acquisition of Landerson Vance 6 years earlier. He wrote, Ryan and Alexis, my assistant showed me an article this morning in an industry publication that named Bello and Reyes as the fastest growing boutique fintech strategy firm in the Southeast. I wanted to write to you because I have something to confess. When I bought Landerson Vance in February of that year, I knew there were 2 senior people competing for an SVP position that I was going to eliminate. I could have kept one of you, I chose not to. Because I could see in your annual reviews and in your emails that the 2 of you had been fighting each other for a year, and I thought, those 2 need to be either married or business partners, and they can't figure that out inside this company. So I dissolved the position and I paid you both to leave. I want you to know I've been quietly watching your firm ever since. You are exactly what I hoped you'd become. The enclosed is not a payment for anything. It's a gift. Consider it back pay for the raise I made sure you never got. Congratulations on the marriage. Congratulations on the firm. BM. I set the letter down. Alexis read it standing over my shoulder. We looked at each other for a long time. Then she started to laugh, and I started to laugh. And Philo the scruffy mutt looked up at us from under the desk like he was trying to figure out what was funny. Some people spend a whole life fighting for a promotion. Some people get handed the whole company by a stranger who was watching them from across the country. And some people, on the Thursday night of a blizzard, get told to come closer by the one person in the whole building who had been watching them the whole time. Alexis and I framed that note. It hangs in our office lobby, right next to the door. Every morning when I walk in, I read the last line, Congratulations on the marriage, congratulations on the firm. And I think about how strange life is, how much of it depends on a single unexpected night when the streets close and the couches are the only place to sit. How some enemies were never enemies at all, How the person across the conference table might be the person you're going to build the rest of your life with. If you're competing with somebody right now, a coworker, a rival, a person you tell everybody you can't stand, I want you to ask yourself one question. Have you ever asked them where they're from? That's all it takes sometimes. That's all it took for us. If this story hits somewhere real, if there's a person in your professional life you've been fighting for reasons you can't quite remember, hit that subscribe button and tell me about them in the comments. I read every one. Until then, look across the conference table. The person you've been fighting might be the person you should have been sitting closer to all along.